The Architect, Dictums, and the Philosophies. Vitruvius. A harmonious design requires that nothing be added or taken away. Le Corbusier. A house is a machine for living in. Architecture is the learned game, correct and magnificent of forms assembled in the light. Mies van der Rohe. Architecture is the will of an epoch translated into space. Less is more. Robert Venturi. Less is a bore. Philip Johnson. Architecture is the art of how to waste space. Louis Sullivan. Form follows function. Frank Floyd Wright. The mother art is architecture. Without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization. An idea is salvation by imagination. Space is the breath of art. A great architect is not made by way of a brain nearly so much as he is made by way of a cultivated, enriched heart. Organic architecture seeks superior sense of use and a finer sense of comfort, expressed in organic simplicity. Winston Churchill. We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. Gustave Eiffel. The principle of architectural beauty is that the essential lines of a construction be determined by a perfect appropriateness to its use. Richard Mayer. When I am asked what I believe in, I say that I believe in architecture. Architecture is the mother of arts. I like to believe that architecture connects the present with the past and the tangible with the intangible. Renzo Piano. A museum is a place where one should lose one's head. Robert A. M. Stern. The dialogue between client and architect is about as intimate as any conversation you can have. Because when you are talking about building a house, you're talking about dreams. Norman Foster. As an architect, you design for the present with an awareness of the past for a future which is essentially unknown. Norman Foster. Architecture is an expression of values. Walter Gropius. Architecture begins where engineering ends. Frank Gehry. Architecture should speak of its time and place, but yearn for timelessness. 98% of what gets built today is shit. Oscar Niemeyer. My work is not about form follows function, but form follows beauty, or even better, form follows feminine. Tadao Ando. You cannot simply put something new into a place. You have to absorb what you see around you, what exists on the land, and then use that knowledge along with the contemporary thinking to interpret what you see. Daniel Libeskind. Architecture is not based on concrete and steel and the elements of the soil. It's based on wonder. Buckminster Fuller. When I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty. But when I've finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it's wrong. Adolf Loos. Architecture arouses sentiments in man. The architect's task before, therefore, is to make those sentiments more precise. Supply and demand regulate architecture form. Kenzo Tange. Designs of purely arbitrary nature cannot be expected to last long. Zaha Hadid. Architecture is really about well-being. I think that people want to feel good in a space. On the one hand, it's about shelter, but it's also about pleasure. Charles Eames. Recognizing the need is the primary condition for design. John Ruskin. When we build, let us think that we build forever. Peter Eisenman. The architecture we remember is that which never consoles or comforts us. Eros Saarinen. To me, the drawn language is a very revealing language. One can see in a few lines whether a man is really an architect. Eliel Saarinen. Always design a thing by considering it in its next largest context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment in a city plan. Louis Kahn. A great building must begin with immeasurable, must go through measurable means when it is being designed, and in the end must be unmeasured. Design is not making beauty. Beauty emerges from selection, affinities, integration, and love. Paul Rudolph. The essential element in architecture is the manipulation of space. It is this essence which separates it from all other arts. Ram Kulis. Architecture is dangerous mixture of power and impotence. Destroy the skyscraper. Anthony Gaudi. Ornamentation has been, is, and will polychrome. Nature does not present us with an object in monochrome, totally uniform with respect to color, not in vegetation, not in geology, not in topography, not in the animal kingdom. Always the contrast of color is more or less lively. And for this reason, we must color wholly or in part every architectural element. Santiago Calatrava. I am always searching for more light and space. Shigeru Ban. I believe that material doesn't need to be strong to be used to build strong structure. The strength of the structure has nothing to do with the strength of the materials. Stephen Hall. For me, the excitement in architecture revolves around the idea and the phenomenon of the experience of that idea. Residences offer almost immediate gratification. You can shape space, light, and materials to a degree that sometimes can't in larger projects. Jorn Utzon. There is a rumor that I can draw and never could. This is probably because I work so much with models. Models are one of the most beautiful design tools, but I still do finest drawings can imagine. Daniel Burnham. Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood. Make big plans, aim high and hope and work, remembering that a novel, logical diagram once recorded will not die, but long after we are gone be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing insistence. Alvar Aalto. Building art is a synthesis of life in materialized form. We will try to bring in under the same hat not a splintered way of thinking, but all in harmony together. Richard Rogers. My passion and great enjoyment for architecture, and the reason the older I get, the more I enjoy it is, because I believe we, architects, can affect the quality of life of the people. Jean Nouvel. Each new situation requires a new architecture. Christopher Wren. Architecture aims at eternity. Edwin Lutyens. There will never be great architects or great architecture without great patrons. Toyo Ito. Architects have made architecture too complex. We need to simplify it and use a language that everyone can understand. Michael Graves. In any architecture, there is an equity between the pragmatic function and the symbolic function. Aldo Rossi. What surprises me most in architecture, as in other techniques, is that project has one life in its built state but another in its written or drawn state. Minoru Yamasaki. The purpose of architecture is to create an atmosphere which man can live, work, and enjoy. Julia Morgan. Architecture is a visual art and the buildings speak for themselves. Arthur Erickson. Profit and bottom line, the contemporary mantra eliminates the very source of architectural expression. Bruce John Graham. Architecture is the design of space, both interior and exterior, so it's much more closely related to dance than it's to painting or sculpture. John Portman. Architecture is not a private affair. Even a house must serve a whole family and its friends, and most buildings are used by everybody. People of all walks of life. If a building is to meet the needs of all the people, the architect must look for some common ground of understanding and experience. Harold Wagoner. The great thing about being an architect is you can walk into your dreams. Louis Barragan. Architecture is an art when one consciously or unconsciously creates aesthetic emotion in the atmosphere and when this environment produces well being. Arnie Jacobson. If a building becomes architecture, then it's art. Alvaro Ziza. Tradition is a challenge to innovation. Odile Deck. Architecture is much more than a profession, it's a discipline. John Pawson. Architecture isn't just about creating new buildings, sometimes it's about returning what's already there. Walter Gropius. Our ultimate goal, therefore, was the composite but inseparable work of art, the Great Building, in which the old dividing line between monumental and decorative elements would have disappeared forever.